Hi, my name is David Warner Matheson, and today is March 9th, 2019, and I decided to make a short video encouraging you to go out and enjoy the constellations that are visible at this time of year, if it's at all possible for you to do so. We have an amazing lineup of celestial features visible in the night sky right now. If you go outside at night this time of year, not just in 2019, but in March, in any year over the next few hundred years, you'll see the stars that I'm showing here. Right now I'm showing the sky just before sunset on the evening of March 10, looking towards the south from the perspective of an observer in the northern hemisphere at about 35 degrees north latitude. All the descriptions in this video will be from the perspective of a northern hemisphere observer. Here in this planetarium app from Stellarium, you can see the moon following the sun, and the moon is illuminated in a thin crescent as it follows the sun, and just above you can see the planet Mars. Let's cycle ahead a little to let the sun go down in the west. You can see that west is to the right because we're facing to the south, and east is to the left as we look at the screen here. Let's fast forward to about 9 p.m. or 2100 hours, and you can see that we have a glorious panoply of stars to observe, which will be absolutely breathtaking if you're able to go outside in a dark place on a clear night. The constellation Orion is already starting to sink downwards on its arc towards the west by 9 p.m. at this time of year. But Orion is still enormous, dominating the western half of the southern sky as we look towards the south. And then trailing Orion across the sky is the constellation Canis Major, the big dog, featuring the brightest fixed star in the heavens, Sirius. And you can follow the line of the famous three belt stars of Orion downward at a diagonal, towards the horizon, that is, downward towards the horizon, to follow that diagonal down to get to Sirius. And then if you follow that same diagonal on the other side of the belt, on the other side of the constellation Orion, upwards from the constellation, roughly along that same line indicated by the three belt stars, then you'll come to the distinctive V-shaped Hyades, about the same distance from the belt stars on the upward diagonal as Sirius is on the downward diagonal on the other side. The Hyades are this V-shaped grouping of stars in the constellation Taurus, and beyond those V-shaped Hyades, if you keep going along that same general line that we followed from the belt, you will come to the brilliant Pleiades. So if you have binoculars or a telescope, it's well worth bringing that outside to have a closer look at the Pleiades. Now going back to the V-shaped Hyades, you can see the giant orange star Aldebaran at the tip of the V, on the prong of the V that's closer to Orion. That orange, large orange bright star is Aldebaran. And if you follow the lines indicated by each half of this V of the Hyades, you'll come to the tips, two stars marking the tips of the two long horns of the bull of Taurus. You follow the V out, you go across a gap of space, and you come to the tip of those horns that start at the V. Now let's return to Orion and find the bright star Rigel in the forward foot of the constellation Orion. Down here, down at the foot of Orion is Rigel, a bright star. And then on the opposite diagonal point across the body of Orion from Rigel is another bright star, the red giant Betelgeuse, in the upper shoulder of the constellation's outline, opposite corner of the constellation's central body from Rigel. Now if you follow the line that runs through the two shoulder stars of Orion, the two shoulders make kind of a line. That line will take you towards the Twins of Gemini. You don't follow up the body to get to Gemini. You follow kind of in the direction of the shoulders, out from the line that the shoulders make, and you'll get to the Twins of Gemini. Can you see the Twins of Gemini here? The twins have their two brightest stars in the heads of the two twins. Those stars are Castor and Pollux. And Pollux is the brighter of the two. Now, rising up in the eastern portion of the southern sky, clear of the horizon and rising up at the same time, this time of year, as Orion starts to arc downwards, we see the mighty outline of Leo the lion in the eastern half of the sky. A very impressive constellation, and especially if you're able to make out the muzzle of the lion, which is right here. The stars of the muzzle of the lion, of his the forward part of his face, are not as bright as the more familiar kind of hook shape that goes along the back of his arching neck and mane. That hook sometimes kind of looks like almost like a clothes hanger. That's very easy to spot, but there's a couple of reasons why it's worth looking until you can see the muzzle of the lion's face. First, the lion's very dignified and regal looking constellation. If you can see this full outline with the muzzle, it's very majestic looking constellation. And second, you can follow the muzzle forward. If you find the muzzle, you can kind of go forward from the muzzle towards the twins, in the direction of the twins, and find a faint but very rewarding constellation between Leo and Gemini, and that constellation is Cancer the Crab. So Cancer is located between Leo and Gemini. You go along the muzzle towards the two stars of Gemini, but then it's a little bit down from that line, just a little towards the horizon from that line. But if you look along that line or a little below it, you may be able to see the beautiful Beehive Cluster of stars. It's also known as Messier 44 or M44. And you can see it with your naked eye, although it does require a clear night and a dark viewing location. And I find that you get kind of the impression of the beehive as if you're kind of seeing it out of the corner of your eye if you look in this kind of general direction. And once you know where it is, you can try and find the beehive with binoculars, with a telescope. It's really beautiful, and it's also mythologically important. Features in a number of star myths from around the world. You might be able to think of some in which a figure in a story takes honey from the mouth of a lion, for example. Now, I just want to point out a few other constellations which are visible in the night sky right now, visible in their entirety. So one that's well worth finding, not very difficult to locate, and that is the constellation Hydra. Hydra is this long serpent with a small circle of stars at the forward end of the serpent, and this small circle resembles the hood of a cobra. Hydra's so long that the tail of Hydra is actually located way back by the constellation Virgo. Virgo's rising in the east at this time of year, following closely behind Leo the lion. In fact, Corvus, the constellation Corvus the crow, is sitting on the back of Hydra and looking towards the brightest star in Virgo. That's the star Spica. You can see Corvus this time of year rising in the east. It's kind of low in the sky, and it's a neat little constellation. It does look like a crow sitting kind of puffed up and staring intently towards Spica, that bright star in Virgo. H.A. Ray says it's as though Spica is a jewel and Corvus the crow is just waiting for a chance to grab it. If you follow the long body of Hydra all the way until you reach the little circlet of stars that makes the cobra-like hood at the front of Hydra, you'll see that Hydra's circular hood is well forward of Leo. That's how long this constellation is. So there's a number of really dazzling constellations and celestial features to see in the sky this time of year. Orion and Sirius and Canis Major, and the Hyades and the Pleiades and the Twins of Gemini and the Beehive Cluster M44 in the constellation Cancer, the Crab, and the long constellation of Hydra, whose head is visible at this time of year, even ahead of Leo, the head of Hydra. Very long constellation. And then the little crow looking at the rising form of Virgo with her bright star Spica. And then, of course, Leo the lion. So I'd like to finish this video by talking about lions very briefly, and something that you can ponder as you go out and gaze at the stars and hopefully see Leo the lion. I wrote a blog post last July about Leo and about the lion's gaze, referencing an article written by the very insightful researcher Richard Casaro, who's discovered some amazing connections in ancient architecture around the world. And in an article he wrote in 2015 about the lion's gaze, he refers to a teaching of an 11th century Tibetan yogi named Milarepa, who said that a dog will chase a stick all day long if you throw it for him. But a lion is different. If you throw a stick for a lion, he'll chase you and not the stick. As Richard explains in his 2015 article, the meaning of that story is that, like the lion, we should not be chasing after sticks. We shouldn't be fixing our gaze on things that are external, that aren't really the source, like the dog chasing a stick. The gaze of the lion is at the source of the one who throws the stick, not the stick. So the lion's gaze is focused on the source, not on the stick. So thanks to Richard Casaro for that insightful article about the lion's gaze. I believe that this is a very helpful metaphor for approaching the ancient myths. The ancient myths are not literal in nature, although they're often mistaken for being literal, or taken as if they are intended to be understood in a literal way. If they are literal, meaning describing literal historical persons and events, then they're almost by definition external. They're about someone else, something else outside of ourselves. However, the ancient myths can be proven to be celestial and esoteric, not literal. They're not about someone or something else. They're about you. They're about each and every man and woman. And as Alvin Boyd Kuhn wrote in 1940, we do not grasp the full meaning of their message until we realize that we ourselves are the central figure in the myths. If we take them externally, if we think they're about external things, that's like the dog and the stick. It's chasing after something outside of the actual source. The real source is within, and connecting with it requires detaching from the training that we receive in chasing after sticks our whole lives. This is part of what meditation is about and why it's so important. So I'll leave that here. We'll finish here. But it's something worth pondering as you gaze up at the stars of Leo and look into the infinite heavens. That infinity is actually inside of you as well. And I would encourage you to gaze into the infinity inside of you on a daily basis also.